Hello, I'm Camilla Clark. I have a company called Female Algorithm Technologies, and we're primarily interested in kind of trying to understand what this new healthcare landscape looks like, and what applications of AI are in this kind of context. As the name implies, we do have a female-heavy kind of bent to things, and I think that that's an interesting angle that I'm going to kind of talk about. So in general with AI, if we're thinking about what we should teach them, I think you also have to teach or think about what the experience should be. These applications kind of impact and can ultimately transform healthcare. You know, why are you seeing the doctor? What is the doctor's role? What's the machine's role? And I think that the kind of augmentation of humans is a really interesting kind of thing to play around with intellectually. So in AI, it's only as good as the data that you use to train it. So the right kind of data does have the ability to transform biomedical monitoring in the same ways that it has with speech and vision. So quality, quantity, and frequency matter. Having seemingly disparate data sources about a group of patients is key. But again, all the sources have to be good. So the other part of this, I think, when you look at the experience side of it, and there's a huge shift towards the patient as a health consumer. And they really should be at the center of the experience, and you should kind of design around that. So for me, as a patient, I want to know that I'm being seen in Technicolor, which is an interesting thing to think about. I want to know that everything's being considered, that all of the dots have been connected, and that those dots are about my life, because everything is connected. And again, this is a very female perspective. We already know that the environment, stress, food, et cetera, it all affects my health, but can't we predict it? So keeping track of all these dots, or rather data points, I think is something that machines will be much better at than humans are. Machines can pay attention to us in a way that humans don't have the memory capacity to. So this becomes a question of, you know, what is the best training data? In terms of women, I think it's interesting. You know, they are the majority of consumer spending, social media users, and healthcare decision makers. So within that, they're already creating all of this data. They're, oddly enough, the largest group of informal trackers, or as I like to say, the original quantified selfers. And all this data is very non-traditional and outside of the clinic, which I think is a really good thing. There's three things that women do a lot of. So one is they take pictures. You know, in general, I think there's 1 trillion pictures being generated a year. I personally have 35,000 pictures on my iPhone. It's less than a year old. I'm not a Kardashian. I'm not a big social media user. I think the average millennial woman takes about 3 selfies a day. So it's kind of, you know, you've got this crazy visual narrative diary. If you can't figure out what my life is about, what I'm doing, what I'm eating, where I'm going, what my mood is, via machine learning by these pictures, then I really think we're doing something wrong. The second thing that women do is they tell stories. And narrative is really kind of a tool that we've used to understand ourselves in the world since the beginning of time. I like to think of data-based narratives, right? And kind of more on this line of data storytelling. So it's much more of a concept of how do you take these stories full of all these data points and rambling things that women like to talk about that go on for, you know, endless hours. A male just kind of starts to gloss over his eyes. Women can recount it, you know, word for word and remember all of these details months later, which is a great trick. But it's really, how do you take all of this data and turn it into something, right? And you can, you know, even just basic voice analysis is really interesting. We're already discovering that we can, you know, actually, you know, diagnose depression that way. What else can we do with that data? The third thing that women do a lot of is digital breadcrumbing. And this is something that has been pretty developed out of Sandy Pentland's lab at MIT. And pictures and stories kind of loosely fall under this umbrella. But again, it's a lot of the, you know, social media, what's happening on your phone, where's all this, you know, fixed location data, et cetera, that we can pull from these people. So this, data in and of themselves are interesting. You can learn lots of things, but can you really get an accurate understanding of someone's health? And I think that this is where something with combining these data with the more traditionally siloed kind of medical data, and can you get, the genomics, the phenotypic data, the metabolomics, the biome, et cetera, proteomics, put it all in this new box with all of these very, very different data sources and actually start to make sense of what's going on with this person's life. So I think in this, you kind of get this ability to account for the complexity of real life. And I think that this is on the scale of importance of, the genome-wide association study was, right? When you start accounting for what's going on in the environment, right, you can start to make more sense of what's happening. And I think right now in healthcare in general, we're only seeing little pieces of the puzzle. And so if you can start to see this wider lens and start to actually understand all of these details and actually start to account for all the variables, then I think that that's really, really a profound thing. And it especially starts to really matter when we get out of this kind of sick land, which I'm very interested in doing. It's, okay, so let's assume we're all healthy, right? And it becomes much more about this idea of caretaking and these early warning signals, right? And what is that? And how do we head those things or, correct the course while it's still a fairly non-invasive process? So anyway, I will leave you with those thoughts.